how this company that, you know, revolutionized how we watch movies, how it all began.
Yeah, and we've got Marc Randolph's story right here.
His book, right?
Yeah, his book, That Will Never Work. And let me tell you, it is a wild ride.
From what I hear, his path to Netflix was anything but straightforward.
Right. It wasn't like he, set out in his early 20s to be the king of streaming.
I mean, you'd think the co-founder of Netflix would have this laser focus on entertainment from day one.
Like, okay, I'm going to build the future of entertainment.
Yeah.
But nope.
No.
He was hopping between tech, marketing, even direct mail.
Wow. Direct mail, like sending out catalogs and flyers.
Yeah. Like, who knew that selling CDs through the mail would be a stepping stone to building a streaming empire,
It's really incredible when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
It almost seems like he was unconsciously gathering all these skills he'd need for Netflix,
Yeah. Like puzzle pieces falling into place.
Almost.
Yeah.
That really reinforces this idea that the most valuable experiences are often the ones outside your direct field.
Right.
Like that breadth of experience can be so much more valuable than just a straight line on a resume.
Makes you think, what experiences from your own life might be unexpectedly relevant to your next big idea?
It's a great question to consider, really.
But let's get back to Marc and his book.
Okay.
He's very adamant that, entrepreneurship shouldn't be this mystical, intimidating thing,
It's funny because you see all these stories about entrepreneurs, and it seems like they all have these aha moments, these flashes of brilliance.
Right, they're all geniuses, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like they were destined for greatness from the start.
They were born to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I think Marc really pushes back on that notion.
He does, and it seems like for him it was more about this constant testing and refining.
And a healthy dose of luck, probably.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of testing, the initial concept for Netflix wasn't streaming at all, was it?
You're kidding. I always thought it was like streaming from the beginning.
Nope.
So what was it then?
DVDs by mail?
DVDs by mail. Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's so old school.
I know. Can you imagine?
That's amazing, though, to think how much the company evolved.
Could you imagine being like, oh, I'm gonna rent DVDs by mail?
I mean, it makes you appreciate how important it is to be flexible, to adapt to the market.
Yeah,
right?
they could have easily just gotten stuck on that first idea.
Like, who knows where they'd be now?
Right, who knows?
Right.
Totally.
I mean, it's amazing to think that they had this DVD by mail idea.
Uh-huh.
But the core principle behind it, the problem they were trying to solve, was actually very consistent with what they ended up doing.
Exactly.
They wanted to solve a problem people would pay for.
And in the late 90s,
Yeah.
that problem was the hassle of video rentals.
I mean, Blockbuster wasn't exactly a customer's dream back then, was it?
No.
Limited selection.
Awful.
Yeah, it was a nightmare sometimes.
Absolutely.
But, the DVD by mail idea, wasn't that a risk in itself at the time?
That's a good point.
I mean, were people even comfortable with the whole online ordering thing back then?
And would the DVDs even survive the trip through the mail?
Right, exactly.
So how do they know it would even work?
Well, that's where Marc's concept of stress testing comes in, I think.
Okay.
He's a big believer in not just having a good idea, but actively trying to break it, to find its weaknesses.
Okay, so unpack that for me. What does it mean to stress test an idea?
He gives this example in the book of mailing a CD to himself to see if it would arrive intact.
Okay.
Simple test, right?
Yeah.
But it's about identifying those potential weaknesses before you go all in.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about refining the idea itself, but also anticipating all the things that could go wrong in the real world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like, what's the absolute worst case scenario? What if your suppliers can't keep up?
Yeah.
What if customer demand is way higher than you expect?
That would be a good problem to have.
It would be, but you still need to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
And what if, and this is a big one, what if a competitor pops up with a similar idea?
Oh, yeah, that's always a possibility.
So asking those tough questions before you launch is crucial.
But even with meticulous planning, there are always curveballs, right?
Oh, absolutely. No matter how much you prepare, there are always things you can't anticipate.
Like that time Amazon wanted to buy Netflix.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That must have been a game changer.
I mean, how do you even process an offer like that when you're just starting out?
Imagine the pressure.
Right.
On the one hand, here's this chance to cash out, guarantee yourself success.
Yeah, and avoid the grueling uncertainty of building a company from scratch.
Exactly. It's like the safe and easy path.
Right.
But on the other hand, you've got this belief that what you're building could be something truly huge, something revolutionary.
Yeah, and turning down Amazon
Oh.
must have taken some serious guts.
It really speaks to their conviction in the vision.
Yeah,
But also remember, this is 1999.
right.
Amazon wasn't the behemoth it is today.
No, it wasn't the everything store.
Not at all. It was an online bookstore, primarily.
Right. And no one could have predicted how dominant they would become.
I mean, it's almost mind-blowing to think about how different things would be if Netflix had become part of the Amazon empire back then.
Right. Like, would we even have Netflix as we know it today?
It's a real testament to the power of betting on your vision, even when there's a seemingly safer path available.
You know, and speaking of safer paths, Mark eventually steps down as CEO, right?
Yeah, he does. Which is not something you see very often, a founder willingly stepping away.
It's like he instinctively knew when it was time to pass the torch.
I think it takes incredible self-awareness to do that.
Yeah.
To recognize that maybe someone else is better equipped to lead the company through its next stage of growth.
Which is a great point to reflect on for anyone, really. Like,
Absolutely.
how do you know when to let go?
Yeah, when is it time to bring in someone with different skills?
Even if it means stepping back from something you've poured your heart and soul into.
It's a tough question, but one that every leader eventually has to grapple with. Yeah, it's a tough one, for sure.
Really?
But in Netflix's case, that someone was Reed Hastings.
Okay, so we've got this, self-made entrepreneur who isn't afraid to test unconventional ideas,
Right.
knows when to step back. But what about those early days? Like, how did they actually land on the concept that launched Netflix? Did they just, magically stumble onto DVDs by mail?
Not exactly. I mean, Mark talks about this period of intense brainstorming in the book. They were throwing every idea at the wall, to see what stuck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they considered personalized shampoo, custom baseball bats,
Wow.
the whole range of things before landing on DVDs.
I love that. So it wasn't just like one eureka moment.
No,
It was a process.
very much so. It was trial and error, iteration.
And a lot of probably dead ends.
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty of those.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway here is the importance of that iteration, I think.
Okay.
They didn't get fixated on that first idea. They kept experimenting, pivoting, refining,
Right.
until they found a concept that really resonated.
It's like, don't be afraid to scrap an idea if it's not working.
Exactly. Or maybe even combine different ideas into something totally new.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. All of this was happening against the backdrop of the dot-com boom.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
There was this frenzy of innovation, this willingness to try new things.
It just makes you wonder, could Netflix have even happened in a different era?
That's a fascinating question.
Like, would investors have been as receptive to their model if it wasn't for that particular moment in time,
Yeah, it really speaks to the importance of timing and context in any entrepreneurial journey, doesn't it?
For sure. But even with perfect timing and a great idea, Mark is adamant that you need to rigorously test those assumptions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't just assume things will work out the way you expect.
Right, the whole stress testing thing. He doesn't just throw that term around lightly.
No, he really emphasizes the importance of it.
He does, yeah. And he offers some, really practical advice on how to actually do it.
Like how to actually stress test your ideas.
Yeah, do you remember any specific examples from the book?
Oh, absolutely. He talks about how they approached customer service in those early days.
Yeah.
They knew that providing exceptional service was going to be key, for a company like theirs.
Right, especially with something as new as DVDs by mail.
Exactly. So they stress tested their systems.
Okay, so how'd they do that?
Well, Mark would actually order a DVD and then deliberately mess up his address.
Oh, wow.
Then he would call customer service, pretending to be like a really irate customer. And he'd see how they handled it,
So he was putting himself in the customer's shoes, literally.
Exactly. It was all about pushing the system to its limits, identifying those weak points before they became major problems.
That's brilliant. I can't imagine many CEOs would be willing to do that.
It really underscores this point that testing isn't just a theoretical exercise.
Yeah.
It's about getting your hands dirty, seeing how things actually work in the real world.
So it's about anticipating problems and then coming up with solutions before they actually impact your customers.
Exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs overlook. They get so focused on the idea itself that they forget about all the practicalities.
The nitty-gritty.
The nitty-gritty, exactly.
Yeah.
But even with the most meticulous planning, sometimes you just get thrown a curveball.
Right. Like that whole Amazon acquisition offer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being a relatively new company
Uh-huh.
and suddenly having this industry giant knocking at your door?
I would be freaking out.
Totally.
Hmm.
It's like, do you take the sure thing, cash out,
Right.
or do you bet on your vision and risk it all?
Tough choice.
And remember, this wasn't just any company. It was Amazon,
Right.
a company known for its aggressive growth strategies.
And its willingness to, disrupt industries.
Exactly. So to walk away from that offer must have taken a level of confidence that's just, like, hard to fathom.
Seriously, it makes you wonder what their internal conversations must have been like.
Oh, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for those discussions. Did they all agree on the decision?
Right. Were there any doubts?
It's hard to know for sure, but what's clear is that they ultimately believed in their ability to build something bigger than what Amazon was offering.
And in hindsight, it turned out to be a pretty good call.
Oh, absolutely.
It's mind-blowing to think how differently the tech landscape might look if that deal had gone through.
Oh, it's a real what-if moment in tech history, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would Amazon have been able to achieve the same level of success with streaming if they'd acquired Netflix early on?
Right.
Would they have even prioritized it?
Who knows?
It really makes you appreciate the impact of those seemingly small decisions, you know?
Yeah. And speaking of decisions, we can't gloss over Mark's choice to step down as CEO.
Oh, right.
Not exactly a typical move for a founder, is it?
Definitely not the norm, but I think it speaks to his self-awareness,
Okay.
his understanding of his own strengths and limitations.
So he was like, I'm good at this part, but maybe someone else is better suited for this next stage.
Yeah, I think he recognized that as Netflix entered this new phase of growth, they needed a different kind of leader at the helm.
It's almost like he was stepping aside to allow the company to reach its full potential, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about ego or clinging to power.
Right.
It was about recognizing when someone else could do a better job.
And in this case, that person was Reed Hastings.
Yeah, who had the operational experience and strategic vision to really take Netflix to the next level.
It's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't always about being the one in charge.
Yeah.
It's about empowering others to succeed. But even though Mark stepped down as CEO, he didn't just disappear, right?
No, not at all. He stayed on as an advisor
Oh,
and board member,
wow.
offering his insights and experience.
That's inspiring. It shows that even after stepping away from a leadership role, you can still have a significant impact on a company's success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in Mark's case, he went on to become a successful investor and advisor,
Yeah.
sharing his knowledge and experience with other entrepreneurs.
That's awesome. But before we move on, I want to talk about one more key takeaway from Mark's story,
Okay.
the importance of persistence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, building a company like Netflix, it wasn't a walk in the park.
Oh, no, for sure not.
They faced countless challenges and setbacks,
Right.
from technical hurdles to competition to the constantly changing landscape of the entertainment industry,
I can only imagine the pressure they were under.
especially in those early days when it wasn't even clear if their vision would work.
Right, exactly.
But they never gave up. They kept pushing forward,
Yeah.
adapting, finding ways to overcome obstacles. And that's such a crucial lesson for anyone who's pursuing a big dream, you know?
Yeah, it's like, don't let those initial setbacks deter you.
Exactly.
There's going to be a lot of noise and uncertainty.
Absolutely.
But as long as you believe in what you're doing
Yeah.
and you're willing to keep learning and adapting,
Well,
you can achieve amazing things.
I couldn't have said it better myself. But, we can't forget that Netflix's success wasn't just about persistence and good ideas.
Okay.
It was also about timing and, honestly, a bit of luck.
Right, being in the right place at the right time with the right concept.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also about recognizing those opportunities, and having the courage to seize them.
Makes you wonder, what opportunities might we be overlooking in our own lives because we're too focused on the obstacles,
It's a great question to ponder as we move into the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Because maybe, just maybe, those seemingly random skills and experiences we have are the very building blocks we need to launch our own Netflix-level success story.
So we talked about how Mark and his team, they kind of rode that wave of, the dot-com boom.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how that era kind of shaped their journey.
It makes you wonder, could this whole story have even happened in a different decade?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but you got to think, the dot-com bubble, it created this environment of, crazy experimentation and disruption.
Yeah, investors were way more willing to take risks back then.
Definitely. Consumers, too. Everyone was eager to embrace new technologies.
It was like this shared feeling that, like, we were on the edge of something huge.
Yeah, like anything was possible.
And Netflix was right there in the thick of it.
Totally. But, even with perfect timing and a brilliant idea, Marc really stresses that success ultimately comes down to execution.
Okay, so it's not enough to just have a good idea. You got to know how to make it happen.
Exactly. He talks about the importance of, building a solid team, creating a culture of innovation.
And really focusing on delivering value to customers.
Right. And he emphasizes that, this doesn't just happen overnight.
It's a process.
A constant process of, iterating, improving, refining.
So never get complacent.
Even when you're on top, keep pushing, keep learning from your mistakes.
Adapt to the changing landscape.
Yeah, always be adapting.
So, what's the big takeaway here?
I think one of the most valuable things we can learn from Marc's story is that building a successful company, it's not about having this, perfect plan.
Right.
It's about being adaptable, resilient, and, embracing the unknown.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Netflix origin story,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with one final question to think about.
Okay, I like it.
What's that one crazy idea that you've been holding back on?
Ooh, that's good.
The one you've dismissed as, too risky, too out there, maybe even impossible.
I think we all have one of those.
What if instead of letting it gather dust, you take a page from Marc's playbook?
And you actually start, stress testing it.
Yeah, really put it through the ringer, see if it can stand up to scrutiny.
Imagine what could happen if we all embraced that spirit of experimentation, right?
Well, maybe we'd uncover the next Netflix, the next big thing that shakes up an industry or even changes the world.
Who knows? The possibilities are endless, right?
So what are you waiting for? Go out there, test your assumptions, embrace the unknown.
But hey, maybe you'll end up on our show someday, sharing your own story of entrepreneurial success.
That's it for our deep dive into Netflix. We hope you enjoyed this trip back to the early days of a company that, changed how we watch movies.
And just remember, the big takeaway is this. Don't be afraid to dream big. Test your assumptions and keep iterating, keep refining.
Until next time, keep those ideas flowing and never stop exploring the possibilities.